All right, today we're jumping into a thought experiment that's been kicking around for 2,000 years. It's this incredible mashup of ancient faith and really modern questions about who we are and what we build. So let's just imagine for a second. What if you took a blueprint that's 2 millennia old and tried to build it right here, right now? And we're not talking about just any old building. Oh no. This is one of the most sacred and, let's be honest, one of the most complicated spots on the entire planet. So the real question is, how could that even work? Well, what we're talking about here is the idea of a third temple in Jerusalem. It's this concept that follows two legendary predecessors. Yet the first temple, which was destroyed way back by the Babylonians, and then the second temple, destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. And yet, the idea of rebuilding it, well, that's been around for almost the entire 2,000 years since. Okay, so before we can even get into the how, we've got to tackle the why, right? I mean, why does this ancient idea still have such a powerful grip on so many people? What was so special about the temple to begin with? You have to remember, before we had synagogues on, every other corner, there was just one temple. It was the spot, the absolute center of worship. People believed it was literally the dwelling place of the divine presence, the Shekinah. Think about that, the closest you could physically get to God. So yeah, you can see why rebuilding it is this massive symbol of restoration, of unity, and for some folks, it's even a key piece of the puzzle for a future messianic age, this prophesied era of peace. All right, so let's really lean into this thought experiment. Let's pretend the project is a go. What would it actually look like? Let's take a little walkthrough, starting with the nuts and bolts, the building itself. And right away, you hit a huge question. Do you go full-on historical reenactment, trying to use ancient methods? Or do you embrace the 21st century and bring in modern tech? Well, the answer is probably what you'd expect, a mix of both, a hybrid. So the ritual core, the really sacred stuff like the layout of the courtyards, the altar, the Holy of Holies, that would have to be ancient, following the old descriptions to the letter. But the stuff holding it all up, that would be totally modern. We're talking state-of-the-art engineering to handle earthquakes, high-tech security systems, fire safety, crowd control, the whole shebang. It's really this blend of a symbolic past with a very practical present. Okay, but of course, we can't talk about building on the Temple Mount without addressing the elephant in the room. It is an incredibly sensitive spot, religiously and politically. And that immediately brings up the big question. What about the Western Wall? The holiest prayer site in Judaism. What happens to it? The answer pretty much across the board is that it stays, untouched, exactly as it is. See, a lot of people don't realize this, but the Western Wall isn't actually a wall of the temple building. It's a retaining wall for the whole platform up top. So a new temple would be built above it. I mean, the wall is so profoundly sacred, such a huge historical artifact, messing with it is just unthinkable. It would just continue to be what it is, this incredibly powerful place for personal prayer, just as part of a larger sacred area. Okay, so we've got our building, ancient soul, modern skeleton. But a temple isn't just about stone and mortar, right? It's about the people inside, the ones who make it run. So who would these people be? And this is where we have to get a really important distinction straight. The people doing the actual rituals in the temple, they would be priests, or in Hebrew, Kohanim. Now, this is not a job you can just go to school for. It's hereditary. It's passed down from father to son. A rabbi is totally different. A rabbi is a teacher, a community leader, someone whose authority comes from their knowledge. So it's not like one is higher than the other. They're just different jobs. The priests would handle the temple rituals, and the rabbis would keep doing what they do now, leading their communities. Which, of course, leads to the next logical question, right? It's been 2,000 years. How on earth would you figure out who actually descends from those ancient priestly families? Well, this is where it gets really fascinating because it's a mix of ancient tradition and modern science. First, you've got family tradition. Surnames like Cohen or Kotz are big clues, plus families have literally passed this oral history down for generations. But then, and this is the wild part, science steps in. Geneticists have actually found a specific genetic marker, sometimes called the Cohen gene, that shows up way more often in men who have this family tradition. Now, it's not like a perfect DNA test, it's not absolute proof, but it's pretty incredible evidence pointing to a shared ancient ancestry. Okay, so we have a place, we have the people. Now let's talk about the purpose. What would actually go on inside a new temple? What would people do there? To really get that, you've got to look at how things used to be. Back in the day, temple worship was all about one central place and a system of sacrifices carried out by the priests.
But after the Romans destroyed the Second Temple, Judaism had to pivot, and it did brilliantly. Worship moved into local synagogues, and over time, prayer essentially took the place of sacrifice.
And that brings us to maybe the most controversial question in this whole discussion, the one that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. If you rebuilt the temple, would you bring back ancient rituals, like animal sacrifice? There is absolutely no single answer to that. The Jewish world is not a monolith. For many people in Reform and Conservative Judaism, the answer is a firm no. They believe the religion has evolved beyond that prayer is the new, more spiritual form of sacrifice. But for some within the Orthodox world, the commandments from the Torah are eternal, and they believe that yes, under very specific conditions, usually tied to a messianic era, those rituals could indeed be restored. So a huge spectrum of belief here. Here's another practical thing to think about. What language would everyone be speaking? Well, the formal, sacred stuff, that would almost certainly have to be in Hebrew. You need that connection, that continuity with the ancient texts. But just walking around, the everyday chatter between visitors and staff, that would be a global mix. You'd hear English, French, Russian, Spanish, Hebrew, you name it. It would reflect the Jewish people today who live all over the world. Okay, let's pull back for a second. We've talked about the building, the people, the rituals. So what does it all mean? When you put it all together, what does this idea really represent in our world today? After digging into all these details, we're back to that fundamental question. Why does this idea still have so much power 2,000 years later? I think at its heart, the temple represents something unique. It's about that original, central point of worship and identity. It's about that feeling of a direct line, a physical connection to the divine. And that's something a local synagogue, as wonderful and essential as it is, just isn't designed to do. It can't fully replicate that. And let's be super clear on this point. In this hypothetical world, synagogues don't just disappear. Absolutely not. They would still be the essential local hubs for community, for prayer, for learning. The temple would be something different, a singular central destination. You can almost think of it like how the Vatican functions for Catholics. You have local churches everywhere, but there's only one Vatican. So we kind of end up right back where we started. Whether you see this as a literal prophecy that's meant to happen, or just a really powerful metaphor, the whole idea forces us to grapple with a huge question. Can a 2,000-year-old blueprint for what is sacred truly fit into our modern world? It's a lot to think about.